It's like Aaron Porter for calling you wrong. Aaron over.
You might want to move to So we'd ask if we could.
It's all right.
About 20 minutes
Oh, sure. We can move as quick or slow as we need to be.
or quicker.
Okay.
Here it is.
Yeah. So, good evening, Council. Tonight, for my presentation, I actually have the FY20 audited financial results. At your desk, you should have the report to City Council, which is the smaller of the two, which is directly to you, and that's actually a for council use only kind of report, so that's not actually publicly published. That's for you all. And then also the actual financial statements. These are the full-on every year that we have to go through an audit as a city, and these are actually posted on the website, as well as the slides that you all should have a copy of as well, that Mr. Rowe will be presenting here this evening, and those are also posted on the website in the cityoffollybeach.com finance section.
I think they're there already, aren't they?
They are.
These are. So we're not going to be posting them simultaneously on the broadcast tonight. If you want to look at it, you're going to have to go to the website and take a look at the slides.
Correct. As well as the full financial statements, they are actually posted on the website right now as well. So if you all want to get a good night's sleep, please help yourself. Without further ado, I will present Mr. Tim Grove. He's the partner on this engagement, and was the one who signed off on this audit. And he's got a quick presentation for you all.
Where do you want me to lay?
They're right here. Yes, sir.
So, good evening.
Good evening.
It's hard for me to remember your first name, so Mr. Grove.
That's Tim.
Anybody else call you Jim?
I get called a lot of things.
I guess the number one question on everybody's mind is anybody going to jail because of this audit?
Well, I'm not an attorney,
Or is it pretty clear?
but my opinion would be, no, I don't think anybody's going to go to jail.
There you go, okay.
So as Lee said, my name's Tim Grove. I'm the audit partner. I'm with Elliott Davis. And for those who've not been through this process before, I'll be as detailed as you want me to be, but I want to kind of give you an overview of what we do, and kind of the process we go through as we audit the city. So I put kind of a couple of slides together to kind of guide through that. But as Lee pointed out, the first part of what I'm going to talk about is this report right here, the clear face. Our job is to issue an opinion on your financial statements, and your financial statements are prepared by Lee. And Lee says, "Hey, I'm ready for you to come in and audit the city's financial statements." So the objective of any audit is the issuance of an opinion. So we're going to tell you whether in our opinion, those financial statements are fairly stable. Now, because you're a government, we actually issue two opinions, and I'll explain the second one in a minute. But and I did put a couple, for those who've not been here for a little brief bio of Elliott Davis. We are the largest CPA firm in South Carolina that's based in South Carolina. We're our home office in Greenville. I'm in the Charleston office. Our Charleston office has about 80 folks in it. So, and the one thing we pride ourselves on is we've been doing municipalities for, actually the firm has been around this year is 100 years, and I haven't been there for the entire time, but that's my understanding. We've been doing municipalities since the start. So we pride ourselves on being experts. And what's unique about, for those who have, I guess, knowledge about typical financial statements, the thing about governmental financial statements, they are financial statements on steroids. They're so more complicated than regular financial statements, and I'll explain a little bit about why. But just to kind of give you a little background, so what this document has meant, so many years ago, and for those who are old enough to remember some of, like Enron, some of the major accounting failures that occurred, one thing that came out of that process was there was no official record of what the auditor actually did. You know, it was kind of this big mystery behind the curtain, and nobody was actually sure. They were just happy when they came out and said everything was fine. And at the end of the day, for a lot of folks, that's what you're looking for. your financial statement is a mountain of financial data. And, you know, unless you're savvy about governmental financial statements, there's a lot of stuff in here you're going to scratch your head and go, what's this for? So you're relying on somebody like me to make sure that when Lee puts this stuff together, that it's in a readable form, under the prescribed format of governmental standards, and it's done the right way. And that's our job, is to come in and do that. So every year when we go to start an audit, every audit's a little unique. That's part of no matter what municipality, every municipality has kind of some nuances, some differences to them. Now there's a lot of commonalities, but what we do is we literally sit down every year and we plan out the audit. We expect the things that we're going to anticipate, a lot of things we expect to see, and we develop our plan based on the risks as we perceive them. And some of those risks can be, for example, one of the challenges that the city of Folly Beach has is it has a small Lee's, you know, chief cook and bottle washer. I mean, and as you can imagine, you're relying on one person to get everything exactly right in a mountain of data that looks like this. So we know that when we go in. So we're going to create our tests to challenge those things and make sure we look in the places that we think are susceptible to misstatement or error. So we go through this process, and by the way, as we go through this process, as you can imagine, we don't audit every transaction in here. Now, a lot of people still believe that we actually come through and comb through every single transaction. We don't do that. We develop a threshold, a materiality threshold, and that threshold is this magic number that we think if your financial statements were off by this amount, it would change the mind of whoever's using those financial statements. Now, so we focus on those transactions that are above that level, but we give the transactions below also an opportunity to be tested because we put some randomness into what we do. So we go through this process. We have because we're licensed auditors, there's a set of professional standards that we have to apply through every process that we go through. And so we're obligated to let you know that we subscribe to those as we went through this. The other thing is we want the user of the financial statement to have some comfort that when they pick this up, a knowledgeable person would understand based on reading through this financial statement how the city accounts for everything and is everything in a place that they would expect it to be in. So we evaluate this as we go through the process. Every financial statement that's created has a certain amount of judgment that's built into it. Estimates are part of this, and we evaluate the estimates and judgments that Lee uses when he prepares the financial statement. For example, when the city buys a piece of equipment, we have to estimate how long we think that piece of equipment is going to be usable, and then we depreciate that over a period of time. Because we know at the end of it, at the end of the life of that asset, we're going to have to replace that. So we're trying to make sure that it's eroding financially over a systematic approach that makes sense. We evaluate the process that Lee uses and determine whether we think that's reasonable. That would be an example of an estimate that's built into this. And all the estimates and judgments that are used, we felt very comfortable with. Now, with every financial statement, there's a potential for certain number of misstatements. When I say that, we're going to post what we call audit adjustments. The audit adjustments we posted are included in this report. And one of the challenges the last 2 years, for those who've seen me before, realized I was here like 5 months ago, which is really late in the process. And one of the challenges last year was there was a software implementation, and there was a new pooled cash account that was used that created all sorts of problems that had to be sorted out. So it delayed our ability to deliver last year's audit. But as we got through that process, it also created some additional adjustments that are having to be posted as we understand how the software works and how this pooled cash account allocates things. So a lot of the adjustments that we have in there that we posted are included this, so you have a chance to see the adjustments that we posted. The other thing in this financial statement, after we get through the numbers, there's a bunch of disclosures. And the disclosures are verbal descriptions of some of the more significant transactions in the front of the financial statements. And our job is to decide whether those disclosures are adequate and represent those transactions in a user of the financial statement well. And we feel like the financial statements do that. The other thing that we want to make sure is any official communication that we have with the city is included in here. Now, the only official communication that occurred this year was the engagement letter we had, where the city engaged us to do the audit, and the representation letter, which represents that the city and Lee provided us all the information that we asked for. There wasn't anything hidden. There are no secrets. They gave us everything we asked for. So all that communication is included in here, because the one thing you need to know is we work for this body. We don't work for management. We work for y'all. Now, we work through management, and had we had a need to call a timeout and come say, hey, we need to meet with council because we have some things that are concerning, we would have done that, and we didn't have any of those situations. So that's, and I guess in concert with that, we didn't have any disagreements with management, and we felt like everything that we discussed was above board. One thing we're always looking for when we develop our plan is how responsive is the group of people we're dealing with? How knowledgeable are the group of people we're dealing with? Are they dodging our questions? Is it taking a long time to get us the answers? Do I feel like my instincts tell me I need to dig more, or am I finding what I'm looking for? Lee is very transparent and certainly not afraid to raise his hand and say, I need some help with this. Listen, some of this stuff is complicated, and I would not want to be the only person that determines how some of these things get reported. So Lee's more than happy to pick up the phone and call me if he needs somebody to look over his shoulder. And so we felt like we had a really good communication level. I think he does a tremendous job considering all the things he's doing and doing most of them by himself. So I did mention there are, before I get into financial statements, I will mention there are 2 deficiencies. One I mentioned, there are 3 types of deficiencies as we go through our process. There are material weaknesses, which means if we don't get this cleaned up, if we don't fix this material weakness in the internal control structure, your financial statements are likely to be misstated. The second level, you didn't have any material weaknesses. The second level are significant deficiencies, which are important enough that we need to let you know so that you're aware of the risks that come with these deficiencies. One of those is Lee works by himself. And so he posts the entries. He controls everything. So that's not uncommon in a small municipality. But we feel obligated to let you know that you just have some segregation of duties issues. So as you can imagine, one of the things that we do is we consider the fact that there are no segregation of duties in a lot of regards. So we need to make sure we test for that. Now, the reason we point that out is because of how massive the amount of data it is. The likelihood, we may not catch everything. So we just need to let you know that that creates problems, or potential problems. Not necessarily creates problems, potential problems. And one of the challenges when you develop a system of internal control is you need to weigh how much it's going to cost you to implement a control that will alleviate you of the weakness that it's created. So what this would require you to do is to have somebody else employed that would work in concert with Lee to make sure that you always have that segregation of duties. Now, I'm not telling you that that's just information that you have. It's up to you. Now, there are certain things that we will recommend as a matter of fact, one of the things as it relates to journal entries, one of the challenges that we have is, so when Lee posts an entry, what we would always like is there an opportunity for somebody to review that entry and go at least challenge, if it needed to be challenged, why did that entry get posted? Now, we always like to, one of the things that we recommend in certain municipalities is at this monthly meeting, at the monthly council meeting, perhaps he brings those entries that he posted and presents them to council with his financial report. Now you're going to say, Tim, I don't know anything about accounting, so he can give me whatever he gives me, and it's not sure that I know what he posted or didn't post. One of the reasons in a small organization we'd recommend something like that, at least it gives an opportunity for somebody to raise their hand and say, that doesn't make sense to me, because there should be a description with the entry. So that would be an example of something that might alleviate the fact that you have this deficiency of the small shop. So the other thing that I mentioned as, and we just talked to Lee again about, as we've developed these recurring entries with this pooled cash account, he's developing some protocols internally so that some of the entries that we posted this year, he'll be able to post themselves in years going forward. So So those are the two deficiencies. The final type of control deficiencies is a recommendation for improvement, and we didn't have anything other than two control deficiencies we pointed out. So that's covers it for my official communication. As it relates to this is the body of your financial statements. And I typically cover just a couple of things. I do want to highlight a couple of things for those who've not been through a governmental financial statement before. So it starts with a management's discussion and analysis. And so we call it the MD&A at the front of the financial statements is Lee's opportunity and management's opportunity to discuss some of the financial changes that happened to the city during the year. So we review the MD&A to make sure that it satisfies a format recommended by the Governmental Financial Officers Association. We felt like it did that. So if you ever wanted kind of a snapshot, a look back of what happened during the year, if you look at the management's discussion analysis, it'll basically give you the high points. After that is our opinion on financial statements, which, as I mentioned before, is unmodified, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide, which means that the financial information that management gave us is materially correct in all respects, in our opinion. Highest level of assurance we can provide, which is exactly what you're looking for. So further in the financial statements, and I did in the slide, I talked about a little bit about the general fund. And I do want to point out why we talk about the general fund so much. Governments are run under what's called modified cash accounting. You have three major funds. Most major funds have a reason that they're created. You have a separate, like beach preservation fund. It has a purpose. We know what money goes into it. We know what money gets spent out of it. You have a couple of those funds. The general fund is the fund that catches everything that doesn't go in one of those other major funds. What the general fund always tells us is what resources you have available to you for future use. Do you have the liquidity that the city of your size would need in challenging times? And listen, we're in challenging times right now. So your general fund had an unassigned fund balance of $3.1 million. So Tim, what does that mean? So GFOA recommends that you have at least, well, it depends on which organization you check with. We like the GFOA. They like to know that you have a minimum of 60 days operating cash available to you. So you have almost 6 months worth of operating cash available to you, which the great thing about reserves is, particularly in times like now, you don't know, there was the COVID Relief Act was very fortunate for everybody, but we've been through times when federal government wasn't able to step up and provide funding. So your nimbleness, your ability, the fact that you have your savings account set aside allows you to operate the municipality without missing a beat. So I can never tell you whether, somebody's always asked me what's enough. Well, I'm not sure I know what that number is. I'm not sure I'd love for it to be a year. Now, I'm not sure your voters would love for it to be a year, but I would tell you, you have a really good fund balance. There's a lot of municipalities I deal with would give anything for 60 days. I mean, it's just, sometimes it's a struggle, and y'all are in a good position when it comes to the general fund, unassigned fund balance. The page after that, I talk about some of the reasons. I always like to include this. There's always a different level of council member some of them are very knowledgeable, and some of them are like, this is Greek to me. So I always like to give them some examples of why we want to maintain fund balance, because you do have some municipalities that always, it's their desire to, we need to spend some money, or we need to do this, we need to do that. And it's not my position to judge. That's your job to decide how it needs to be spent. I'm here to tell you when you're butting up against bad financial policy, and you're not there. You're in a good financial situation.
So GFOA says we should have 2 months of general fund.
That's what they recommend.
And we have 60 days.
You have more than that.
6 months.
You have almost
6
6
6
months.
months.
Yeah.
6 months.
So 180 days.
Thank you.
So one of the things, if you flip to the general fund revenue slide, one of the things when we go through our audit process is we expect we know where the majority of your funding comes from. So we're evaluating as we go through our process to make sure the money came in the way we expected it to come in. But not only do we send confirmations to your funding sources, but we also compare what you received relative to how you budgeted to determine whether management is budgeting, is managing, anticipating what the expenditure is going to be on the front end and the revenues that are available to offset that. Now, this was a crazy year, so, but as you can see, fund balance went down slightly in the general fund, which meant you managed your expenditures relative to the revenues you received, which is what we would want you to do. And if we ran into a situation where, like, we're spending a lot more money than we're making, we would certainly want to know that council's addressing that and the management's addressing that. So we tested the revenue side and we tested the expenditure side to ensure that things were working as we expected them to. Because we're always developing tests on how we expect things to unfold during a particular year. So after your major financial statements, you have two enterprise funds. So I talked before about your governmental funds. You also have two enterprise funds. An enterprise fund is a fund that's operated like a business, and you have the water fund and the sewer fund. So we evaluate those independently as well, as we would, almost like we would audit a business. So one of the things that we know when we deal with municipalities, unless you have a lot of growth, we would expect revenues to be fairly constant, and we would expect expenditures to be fairly constant. So we're looking for plausible relationships. Now, when we don't have one of those relationships working the way we expect it to, we raise our hand and we ask questions. And you can see we put some of the descriptions in here about why COVID certainly impacted the use of our utilities this year. And then the other thing is there was some cleanup of some old outstanding AR that occurred during the year. So as we kicked the tires on that, all the answers we got and all the numbers that we tested answered those questions. So we were satisfied that the enterprise funds were operating as they were expected to. After your enterprise funds, I have a listing of the other funds you have as well: the State Accommodations Tax Fund, the Local Accommodation Tax Fund, the Local Hospitality Tax Fund, the Beach Preservation Fund, and the Tourism Fund. All those have revenues that come from some unique sources and unique the way the funds roll, and we evaluate that those funds came in the way they were supposed to. And once money goes into a fund for a purpose, it's our job to test to assure that you're spending the money only on the purpose that the council wanted it to be spent under. And we tested and we were satisfied with that. Final page. So I mentioned before that we issue two opinions. So because you're audited under governmental auditing standards, we're required to consider your system of internal control as we go through our tests. And I mentioned the results of that testing before with those two significant deficiencies. So that doesn't mean we audit internal control. We just evaluate the controls that we visit whenever we test certain cycles or transactions. Which means we didn't look at every cycle that you have. We looked at the ones that we felt like were significant, and certainly looked at the ones we relied upon. And we had those two deficiencies I mentioned, which are outlined in some detail in the back of this report. But outside of that, I think certainly compared to our first year last year when we had the software dilemma, things went really well this time. I mean, we're here in November, and I think I was here in the summer last year, so we were 6 months ahead of last year. And I mean, considering COVID and all the challenges, the remote work and all that, if you'd have said that I'd been here in November, I'd have told you were crazy. December, earliest probably January. So we're very happy with the results of the audit. So Mayor, I'll talk forever if you let me. So I'll stop there and see if anybody has any questions.
I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I just want to focus on the deficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, it's my understanding that although Lee is the driver, let's say, of the budget, there are all these other checks and balances. For example, a department head. For example, a council. So as far as when you say a deficiency, I don't just see Lee working in isolation. I see a check and balance of all the other folks that he works with. Is that not enough to mitigate deficiencies, or am I missing something?
No, you're on the right track. For example, right now, there is oversight, but there's not oversight to a lower level. So for example, if Lee posted an entry, and he posted it incorrectly, what's the likelihood of that entry being discovered by anybody other than Lee or the auditor?
A department head.
Perhaps, if they're looking at entries, but I'm pretty sure the department heads are not reviewing Lee's journal entry.
They're not entry, but aren't they looking at like monthly reports or, certain things like that?
And one of the things that we'd be concerned about is the timeliness of when something like this would be discovered and the likelihood of whether it be discovered. And so, I'm not telling you anything's wrong. I'm telling you an area where we would want if you could improve the control over the fact that you have a small shop. I mean, I'm not sure you can fix what we would consider to be the ideal system of internal control. You probably choose not to because of the cost that would be involved.
So, Dr. Houghton is new. We've had the same deficiency since I've been on city council
Right.
since 2002. So
Okay.
unless you're gonna go out and create more jobs and make the
Okay.
accounting department bigger.
That was my question. Oh, you must say this every year.
I do.
Oh, well, say no more. We're deficient.
We're deficient insofar as that potential accounting vulnerability, but with regard to actual cash, a disbursement, it requires multiple people if it's over a certain threshold. So there shouldn't be any surprises that a check was written for $50,000 and only one person had awareness of that.
Right, so what I would always, so here's the challenge is, if a check for $50,000 did get written, how quickly would it be identified? I mean, Lee has the ability to do that, right? I mean, and that would be, in a perfect world, we would have whoever's doing this not have the ability to sign any checks. That's what ideally, that's the perfect system of internal control. Now, as your auditor, I'm always going to drive you towards what I consider to be the perfect system of internal control. And you're going to decide whether you want to spend the money to achieve that level of control and what satisfaction are you getting by having that. Are you happy with the evaluation that the department heads are doing? Do you have controls? You have a control that says if I have a check above a certain level, I've got to have multiple signers, things like that. So you are doing things to mitigate that. But for example, I'll give you a prime example is if you issued a bond, and bond accounting is complicated. And so when Lee posted his entries for the bonds, who would ever look at that to make sure that it was posted correctly?
Ultimately you, right?
Well, that's right, and I can't be part of your system of internal control. So that, and I would say, in this, and I'm giving you, once again, the ideal situation. In the situation I just described, the first thing Lee would do is pick up the phone and say, Tim, help me post this entry. I can provide technical guidance, but ideally, I cannot be, you should have a control that prevents that from happening. So I'm talking about the perfect world of internal control and the ideal. My job is to make sure that you're aware of it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Once again, appreciate it.
Sure.
And I know Lee said it was a little bit less stressful this time, since you got the software in place and you're not trying to work through brand new software and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so up next is proposal for the surfing ban, if you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, from Second Street to Second Street. And the way that Chief Gurries and I come up with this is, there's markers put up right now that says you have to stay 200 feet away from the pier. Contrary to some of the emails you got, it's not 300 feet, it's 200 feet. There's markers on the beach right now that are ignored every day by surfers. So we just said the easiest way to do it is to say, for his enforcement group, is to say you can't surf from this block to this block. It gives them an easier spot to go out there and move people around. And this 200 feet, 200-foot law is a state law. You know, it's not one that we made up years ago and said, oh, you gotta stay 200 feet from the pier. That's a state law for everybody. And so that's where we got the Second Street to Second Street. And it's just easier markers saying, you know, you're going out here on Second Street, you're going out here on Second Street, you can't get in the middle. If everybody was surfing every day, from the emails I got, you could walk on surfboards from Second Street to Second Street, just about, I think, you know, and there's no way that they would all stay 200 feet away from the pier, just like they don't do every day. So that's where the Second Street to Second Street pier comes up. And as I told a council member today, I was on a construction job twice. The crane boom fell. They don't fall because they're not inspected. They don't fall because anybody's expecting mechanical problems, because they check them daily, monthly, weekly. I mean, you know, cranes are a high technical part of checks and balances because of the things we're doing. Thank God, both times on the construction site that the crane boom fell, we didn't kill anybody. We destroyed a truck one time, but nobody was in the truck. And it's not something that a crane operator wants to go through when his boom falls on him, because then he's got to go through all kind of checks and balances and tests and, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not to mention what could happen on the bad side. But so anytime that you're working with mechanical equipment around people, it's dangerous, because, you know, if you made it, it will fail, I guarantee you. Not when, but I mean, not if it will, but when it will. It just depends on where you are at the time. So that's why we wanted to make sure we got people back from the pier. Surfers are the worst people that violate that 200-foot limit. Swimmers, you can get them back. Boogie boarders, you can get them back. The lifeguards can usually blow the whistle and move them pretty easy. You know, if you want to say, while we're out there working, you got to be 300 feet from the pier or 500 feet from the pier to swim or boogie board or whatever. That's fine. Now we're getting into other things like franchises, and my God, we can just move the franchise down, you know, if we have to, whatever we need to do. But we do not, as a city, want to be liable for anybody that may get hurt. And it's just like, I can't guarantee you anybody get hurt. I hope nobody gets hurt during the whole process, for contractors, for the pier, for us, for anybody. But it could happen. There you go. You got my speed.
So, I'll go first, I guess. I get that. I mean, absolutely. And I think that's probably something that is hard for a lot of people to see, because the equipment isn't out there yet. You know, it's still on the beach. It's still in the apron of the pier. So it's like, what's the big deal? So I do think people will probably see that as a safety issue, as things, you know, as they start, you know, put everything on the pier and start moving the booms back and forth. I wonder if, you know, we kind of take a graduated approach and we just start enforcing the 200 feet from the pier now. You know, we finally have the markers are up. It's clear what that distance is and where it is. We start enforcing it. And, you know, I think there are a couple of other ways to do it. We also, you know, maybe we allow surfing, you know, before 8 a.m. and after 6 p.m. or something like that. And if people aren't abiding by that, and the, you know, when paper name is like, wow, these people are not listening, you know, then absolutely something more needs to be done. But just a blanket approach to this is, it's just a lot. And also I think, you know, to keep the surfers out of the water, but allow the swimmers. You still have heads in the water. And if that's the, you know, that's the safety issue is, you know, you still have boogie boards in the water and you still have all these heads in the water. You know, if you got to keep the surfers out, then probably everybody should be out.
I didn't say the surfers had to stay out of the water. I said they can't surf near the pier.
Right,
and see, when you go out there, the swimmers don't generally try to get up next to the pier to catch a break. The boogie boarders don't try to get up next to the pier to catch a break. The surfers, during a storm, we've had people, and Andrew can comply with or substantiate this. crazy as it may seem, they'll break onto the pier as it was, break into the pier, run down the pier and jump off the end of the pier so they don't have to paddle out. Tell me they don't know that they aren't being within 200 feet of the pier. I mean, you know, it's those guys have a different mentality and thought when it comes to catching the break. And they know every year, how many times do you get called by the people at the pier, for the people fishing and the surfers, having a conflict because they're too close to the pier, you know, so it's just ongoing.
How many?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but that is a routine call.
During the summertime though, right? When there's lifeguards out there.
And they're out of the water at 10, like they can't, you know, they can't.
But they
serve
still
after
get, they
10
still
a.m.
get within, before 10, they can't be within 200 feet of the pier,
Right.
period, by state law. 24/7, 365. And they still get calls because, you know, I hear them, and I've seen them where, you know, they had a fight last year between a surfer and a fisher person because a fisherman got tired of them being in the way and actually probably shouldn't have. When he threw out his sinker, you know, went a little bit further than he probably thought it would. But, you know, so it's just a history of them not abiding by the rules and regulations.
Anybody else?
But, so the 200 feet is a state rule, and 200 feet would cover the safety zone for where you need them at. So why are we going to add regulations instead of enforcing what's already there?
Because it was just easier for those guys to enforce it than 200 feet. I mean, we could put somebody out there who's looking at the marker tomorrow morning and start writing citations.
I mean, if you're gonna do it
200 feet.
anyway, I don't get why. If you're not gonna have somebody out there writing tickets, you're just gonna say, okay, if you're from here to here, you can't do it, you're gonna add to the restrictions, but you're gonna go through the same enforcement process, so what's the difference? They're gonna do it anyway.
It's the same enforcement that you have, that you can't be in this area between 10 o'clock and 6 o'clock.
Well, then just enforce what's there and it's fine. I mean, personally, I don't see the reason to add more
Well,
rules,
200
and we can
feet.
just enforce the current rules.
Actually, you need to
That'd
be
be
further
fine.
back than 200 feet, because 200 feet when they're swinging materials is probably not that far enough back.
And if
State
it
law says
changes-
200 feet.
That's state
force
law
200
every
feet.
day, not when you're building not when you're in a construction zone.
Right,
That's
so
what
when,
changed.
why wouldn't they have, and most job sites, when they have stuff like that, they have safety barricades out for OSHA reasons, don't they, where
They
people
won't
are
let-
allowed
they
to
won't
walk?
let 'em
When
put-
they do renourishment, they put out fencing barricades so people can't walk past it.
They put out barricades, we could hire somebody to go out there and put out fencing every day back and forth.
We don't need to hire anybody to do anything, it's not our job project.
They wouldn't give them that on their permit, because I asked them when their permit, they would not give the construction site the ability to keep fence on the beach and the ability to put, I asked about putting buoys out in the water, a string of buoys anchored in the water. They couldn't get a permit for it.
No.
How about a
So-
singular buoy? They allow a singular buoy
Not by the construction site, they won't.
by us?
We'd have to go see if we could get a permit to put it there.
I mean, I think it would be,
About
yeah, I think,
head of
I think,
the
the way- yeah, I think the way it's written, I think is too soon and too much. But I do think a buoy that marked it at 300 feet would be, and then tell the surf rider folks, you know, okay, it's clearly marked, now police your own. It'll be stringently enforced now because of the construction, and have them kind of put some peer pressure on those that are violating, realizing that if violations continue, then it will be expanded.
You know, the flip side of that is 300 feet away from the pier is not a good break.
300 feet
Surfing
was
there for the
the,
break.
300 feet was a recommendation by one of the project managers. Said it's 200 now, 300 is what Cape Romaine recommended. And I think 300 would be the wise choice.
And another 100 feet.
How far is Second Street? What's your proposal?
I didn't measure it, but it's 200 feet's probably, 200 feet's about where that walkway, about 1.5 street. It's
Yeah,
about where that
200
walkway
feet is-
comes through at the end of the parking lot.
So second to second is 300.
Pretty close. It might not be quite the Second Street, but it's gonna be close to Second Street.
And that's where it is now.
No, it's at 1.5, or not quite 1.5. Where the handicap walkout is at the end of the parking lot on the east side
Yeah.
of the pier, It's not quite to that walkout, 200 feet. There's a red post out there, you can walk out there and see it, but it's not quite to that walkout. And that's about 1.5 blocks.
The second
Okay,
west strikes me as being considerably longer.
I'm
I
gonna,
just- Go
I'm
ahead.
gonna dive into the deep end here, literally, okay. Okay. All right, so, I'm like, whoa, all right, so let's say 200 is 200. Let's just say for the sake of it, 300 other blocks. Okay, my thing is I'm comfortable sort of saying one sort of group. So, and everyone is a human, so everyone could get injured. I could be swimming, I could be, you know, whatever it is. So my question from the get-go was, why would we not just identify land and sea, who's ever in the sea, a fisher person, a this person, and just say, these are the lines. Now, after you do the lines, after we agree, okay, it's whatever the line is. So then my question after that is the timing of this. So, from what I understand, okay, there's a time question. Is it too early? Is it too late? So on and so forth. So, is there a way, just like we said, 6 months from now, the pier opens up. 6 months from this. So, is there a way to work with the construction people? I'm just asking that, okay, it's pretty clear we start here. Do we then have to do, you know, later on more or less? I don't know.
Okay, so that, talk to me about the time question right now. In the summertime, when most people are out there, is you can't surf from third block to third block in that area. When it's a swim zone with tourists, okay? So that's already timed out from May to 15th to September to 15th, something like that.
Okay,
Work-wise, you know, you give them special permission to start work at 6:30 in the morning. As a council, you give them permission to start work at 6:30 in the morning. So if you're not gonna be out there when construction can be working
oh yeah,
on the
no,
pier.
I mean date. The time I knew it would be like, the.
Oh, what, you mean dates?
Yeah, I mean dates, like the time it's gonna be dark because we let them do it early. So I
Well-
mean like actual dates, because.
Well,
we're-
once they start, which will be in the spring, at least by the spring going out.
Right.
Going out,
Right,
which they'll probably start before the spring, because they're supposed to have the other one done by the spring of 2021, the pier head to open back up. You know, once they start, they're gonna be, it's gonna be from that date until they say, cut the ribbon, the job's finished.
yep,
But they're gonna be out over the water. It's gonna be continuous from that date on.
yeah, I mean, that's my only thought as far as, you know, the reality of it.
And timing for us is, if we agree to move forward with some change, it's gonna take 2 months to get the ordinance changed.
Oh. And to
Because it's
engage,
not on the agenda tonight, so you're talking about December, January.
and to engage with everyone that wants to be out there. It's not just surfers. I mean, it's like I said,
You know, you're not supposed to be swimming, you're not supposed to be fishing. You know, there's no surf fishing within 200 feet of the pier,
Yeah.
there's no swimming within 200 feet of the pier. It's all predicated on that state law, that you're supposed to stay away from a pier, a built pier in the water, the state of South Carolina, 200 feet.
Well, to me, this actually solves some previous issues and gets us ready for, you know, a new pier. So, I mean, but again, I might be Susie Sunshine and missing something, but it's, I mean, it kind of cut and dry to me. I mean, it's a liability issue and it's safety issue and it's land and sea. Because I don't want to be walking near a construction zone. So I'm just,
I think you saw some bulldozers one day, didn't you? During the renewal process.
I did, and I
Dancing
stayed
with the
far,
bulldozers?
I stayed far away. Far away.
Okay, so I hear start writing tickets tomorrow for 200 feet. Do y'all have any energy to expand that zone to 300 feet?
Not now, I don't.
You got your walking orders, start writing tickets tomorrow. Drag them in, give them a ticket.
That's not the walking orders that I want to give and portray to the public. I mean, the walking orders is a state law to
You say
enforce.
enforce the law.
Yeah, no, I'm saying enforce the law, but I'm not sending Gestapo out and write tickets to everybody. We're merely saying follow the state law. We don't feel the need to expand upon it and further incriminate and restrict people, especially if you're not gonna do it to swimmers and bodyboarders. That's just unfair. Why politic one group of people if you're not gonna do it for
Well, the
everybody?
swimmers and body, and.
So everybody's supposed to
stay
everybody's supposed to stay
about
200 feet away from the pier.
Yes.
So it's not just surfers. Everybody is
Everyone.
By
susceptible.
state law, everybody's.
Everyone.
supposed to stay
So
away
it's
from
not just surfers that you're gonna
No.
ticket tomorrow.
No.
It's everybody that's 200 feet from the pier.
Exactly.
If we tell you to get away from the pier and you don't, you get a ticket.
The
There you
laws,
go.
that's
Just
it.
make, as long as it's fair across the board.
It is.
And Amy
It
alluded
will
to,
be now.
Amy alluded to a marking. Is there in fact
I
flags?
mean, I don't want them to get tickets. That's not the walking orders. It's instructing them,
It's a state
educating.
law. We need, listen, it's state law. Do we have a choice?
Because of the construction?
It's a state law. You enforce it, but you don't go out there and crack heads over it.
Uh,
And they
I'll-
know the difference between what I'm talking about.
I don't expect anyone to crack heads. Okay, I don't expect it at all.
You gotta
Okay?
specify sometimes in this business.
Okay, so I'm talking, we're a community, I'm talking civility, okay? But I'm also saying it's a state law. So,
Well, I'll give you civility. How many times you been flipped off when you ask them to move?
And then you write them a ticket.
Ha ha. So.
Well, if people don't understand and they're not polite about it, it's just like a speeding ticket. You don't give a speeding ticket to everybody you pull over. You probably give out, if I had to guess, I'd say probably half. If they're nice and considerate and it was truly a mistake, you give them a warning, let them go
Well,
about their
that's
business.
up to the officers.
I understand.
What I'm saying is they need to
But
be
the
out
general
there
description
tomorrow
that you gave
making sure
was go out there and
it's
start writing tickets and enforcing it 100%.
I
That's,
guess, I don't know that they need to be out there enforcing it, but when they are out there, I think we gotta go through an education process, and I trust, I guess, from 30 years of experience, I trust officer discretion. I trust the guys to know the ones that need to hold the ticket, the ones that need to be charged, and the ones that just need a whistle and be pointed in the right direction.
and that would be no different than speeding. I mean, that's all up to
That's
them.
what I said. They just need to be out
Well,
there
you
enforcing
said it a
the
little
law.
bit
kind of way you
stronger.
came across it. was a little
So, I
rough.
mean, I mean, that's you all.
I can't tell an officer to write a ticket. You know that.
But you said the walking orders from the council was to go out there
Enforce
and
the law.
write tickets.
Fine.
And
Yeah,
the marching orders from council was to go out there and use discretion and make sure people are informed and educated about what the law
Well,
is.
I will say that all the surfers that I've seen are informed. They're educated and know what the law is.
Well, I think it'll be much clearer now because the red posts are there. And so as an education, you know, an officer can say, hey, you're over here, you need to be over here. And now, those were never there before, you know, and that may be something that we continue to have, you know, so people can judge, you know, and maybe we need to put a flag on there.
Well, in the
or something.
summertime, the lifeguards do a great job of
They do,
enforcing
but
that.
right now we
They
don't have
truly
them.
do. It's
Right.
very difficult for PSOs to blow a whistle because I've experienced this where they just ignore you and flip you the bird. And
Right.
so I think, as Bill mentioned, peer pressure from the surfing community.
Right.
They need to ban, you know, and they're great people. I mean, they really are. It's just that there's a few rotten apples that make it bad for everybody. And those people are the ones that I feel need to be disciplined and informed, as
But they
Bill said.
realize what's at stake.
Right.
There will be
They,
peer pressure.
they
Our officers won't
can
have to
achieve
do much.
that within the community, I think. So,
Well, I think they know
There's a-
what's at stake.
at least at this point, I think if we see it being abused down the road in the next 30 days or the next meeting, then yes, we should address it. Then it should be addressed.
Right.
I trust
Okay.
the people that have to work with it, and I trust the other people that have to live with it.
Okay,
So,
we've run out of time here.
good.
But anyway, so if it hadn't come up, we wouldn't have had this discussion and they would have just kept on.
Well, I-
So now, guys, in the surf community that are listening in today, inform your peers. Take care of your problems.
So does it
You-
stop here,
you're up now.
or is there more, like, we kind of enforce it and see what happens, and, you know, maybe there's no further discussion?
Yeah, it's not up for a vote. It's
Right,
not-
right, but it's not gonna
on the
be-
agenda, it's just for discussion.
Right, and it may
200
not
feet.
go forward in
200,
December
right?
either, it's just,
Right.
it's done, right,
Okay.
okay, just
Just
clarify.
the law.
Release yourselves, or we will.
Good, all right, the law.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Ms. Ray, you're up.
Whew.
You got 15 minutes.
All right, well,
Okay. smoke-free beaches. This is, well, I mean, we're all aware of the, you know, the toxic elements that come into the beaches and the waterways and our, you know, marine life because of the cigarette butts. It's a big problem, and we have a lot of wonderful folks that do beach sweeps throughout the year, and cigarette butts are always the major contributor to litter. I know we get the data. I'll be happy to share with you the data, but the number is significant. And you know, I think a lot of people are like, well, why would you, you know, ban just, why have a cigarette ban or smoking ban? But you know, litter in South Carolina is, you know, you're not allowed to litter anywhere, but this actually gives our police officers, our public safety guys, you know, a way to enforce something. So I do think it will make a big impact on the cleanup and the litter on our beaches. And I feel like that, you know, this is a good time to do it, to try to get something as well as education out before our hopefully, you know, robust spring and summer season begins. And you know, I think it's something worthwhile to consider. We've been a leader in environmental protection, you know, out here on Folly for, you know, since the plastic ban. And I feel like something like this can just sort of connect the dots with that and even further our, you know, our position on that. So this is a, you know, a start of hopefully a positive conversation, and you know, curious as to how you all feel about it.
I support the ordinance.
I missed that.
Said I support the ordinance.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You know, and it's simple. It's just the beaches and the beach accesses. You know, so there's no, you know, we didn't want it to overreach too much, because I know how people feel about the smoking, and that's fine. You know, and there's room to add if, you know, parks or something like that. But that's, you know, this is time for the discussion. So.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So Amy and I participate in something called the Folly Association of Business Litter Committee, and this has been a topic of theirs for a few meetings now. The one thing I'd like to add to this potential recommendation is that there's also a focus on the marsh and riverfront, that we might want to include areas like the Folly River Park, and I can think of two of the pocket parks, Shadow Race and the one on East Ashley on the marsh, because whether it's windswept, tidal flooding, you know, birds, these things find their way into the marsh, which is, you know, every bit in my mind as important and critical as is the beach.
And, you know, I've asked some of the, you know, the people who head up the beach sweeps, and they don't often make it to those areas for the sweep. So, you know,
all over the place, but I know some of the other islands have taken this in. I'd be curious to see what some of the results are, if there are any results before and after.
their results are kind of, so Isle of Palms and Sullivan's, it was passed in late 2019. So
Right.
they're not, you know, they have results, and I think they do feel like it's made a little bit of a difference. One good thing is Sullivan's and Isle of Palms passed this. The CBB was planning to roll out like a whole marketing campaign to educate,
Right.
you know, visitors to,
Right.
you know, visitors, hey, no smoking on the beach, that sort of thing. That, of course, did not happen because of the pandemic. I reached out to them, and they're definitely, you know, willing to include Folly in that education. So that could even further, you know, the education initiative, which a lot of it, that's just what it's going to be. You know,
Yeah.
so the timing again is good, in that we could possibly, you know, be
Coattail that.
included with that.
Yep.
How about if the timing's bad, like think about everything else that we've been through in 2020, and you're gonna further hammer more restrictions and take things away in 2020. I mean, they don't even have full information yet on how it's been at Isle of Palms and Sullivan's for the past year. So would it not be prudent just to wait and get some results from them first?
No,
And I can understand that I can do math real fast, at least short math, like 4 + 3. And I understand that I'm already seeing enough heads to where it really doesn't matter what I say. But we've been through enough this year with restrictions and this, that, and the other, what you can't do, can't. A lot of interest in passing another one that people can't do right now.
And I 100% understand
I understand the
that,
litter aspect,
Right.
you know, but just, I'm what we can't do.
but we do actually have the data of how much cigarette litter there is.
But you haven't gotten the data from Isle of Palms or Sullivan's Island as how much this ordinance has helped things or not. Because I'm willing to bet that you're still gonna find a considerable amount. And I really don't think this is doing more than a feel good thing, to be honest with you. It sounds great on paper, and CVB, that's wonderful.
There are
They're finally
over
gonna spend some money on quality.
300 coastal communities that have a smoke-free beach. And I don't think that, that we would continue to have these and municipalities would do this if it wasn't effective,
Really?
It's not funny. I mean,
No, it is,
you know,
because
I mean,
municipalities
if you do
pass
a
through good
beach
things all the
week
time.
And you see the amount of cigarette butts. I mean, there are 80% of the people that on the beach, I'm gonna go do it in my car and then come out to the beach. Yes, you're still gonna have the 20% of people that are gonna do it, and they're gonna be educated, and then hopefully they won't do it again. If you don't do anything, then we're still gonna just be an ashtray. And I hate that if the timing, I agree with you.
You're the one bringing it up,
I
Ms.
know,
Ray.
I'm
So you
just
can
saying.
control the timing all on your own.
Yeah, but, if you don't do something now, it takes, we've gotta have 2 readings, then you miss a whole season, then you're back to fall.
Then don't say you disagree with the timing.
So I understand the restriction part, but I think this is not important.
My only thing about saying yes or no or yes. In my lifetime, when you say no to something, you say yes to something else, okay? So if I am saying no to less cigarette butts, I'm saying yes, we cannot any longer have any more trash. So that's why yes and no is fluid, okay, for me, because it seems fair. And that's a value, then we have to reinforce it. If the timing is difficult, because it's like, oh my heavens, I mean, I get, like, who wants more no's? The fact of the matter is, this is the process, we're saying yes and no to everything, and we'll end up where we need to be, educating and months along the lines. And I think it's reasonable to move forward with what we need to begin.
Okay, I have to call time on you. Till it's 7 o'clock. And with it being 7 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. And you can call the roll.
Mr. Barker?
Here.
Mr. Farley?
Here.
Mr. Groom?
Here.
Dr. Houghton?
Yes.
Ms. Ray? Mayor Goodwin?
Here.
You have quorum.
Okay, so we'll have the invocation this evening by Reverend Summing, followed by the pledge of allegiance. You want to step over here so folks can hear you?
Thank you for letting me join you all tonight. Our Father, we just come to you. We thank you so much for our leadership here on Folly Beach. And communication stays open between everyone, Father God. Thank you for the community of faith that we have here on Folly Beach. It's such a pleasure and joy for me to serve in. And Lord, we thank you for rational thinking, and we thank you for reasoning together, and we thank you for all those things that promote wisdom, Father God, and discernment, and ultimately joy and peace and happiness and goodness. Thank you for Folly Beach. Thank you for the mayor and the council. I lift them up to you for direction in these perilous times, Father God, in which we dwell. And we just say we love you, Lord. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you.